Hey folks, today we're going to talk about the live well system and the plumbing on your bass boat. Stick around. Hey folks, Keith here at Chicken Thigh Fish, and welcome aboard and welcome back to the Getting It Done video series. Today's video is going to be about the plumbing systems, including the live well system on your bass boat. Now, the bass boat that I own is a 2021 Tracker Pro Team 175 TXW. So obviously we're going to go over this boat, and you may have a similar boat, maybe another boat by Tracker, a different model, or from another brand name, but I gotta believe that most of the principles involved here are going to be the same across a wide array of different bass boats. So on my boat, the system incorporates the use of 3 pumps, 2 live well pumps and a bilge pump. So we have 3 pumps on the boat. All 3 of those pumps are controlled from the driver's control console. And you'll see here on the left side of the steering wheel, I have a bilge toggle switch, which is simply a 2-position toggle, off or on. And on the right side of the steering wheel here, we have the controls for the live well system. We have the top toggle switch, which is for the fill and aerate functions, and the bottom toggle switch, which is for the recirculate and aerate functions, as well as the pump out function to empty your live well. These toggle switches are 3-position, the middle position being off, up being timer, and down being continuous. So when you use the timer function, what that does is self-explanatory, puts it on a timer as opposed to continuous. What it does is it operates for about a minute, and then it turns itself off for about 3 minutes, and then it turns itself back on for about a minute, and so on. So if you don't want it going constantly, you can put it on the timer function. So let's take a look at the live well itself, and we'll start there. So the live well is right here, and what we have is a 21-gallon live well, and you'll see several features inside the live well. We have 2 nozzles. This is your fill and aerate nozzle. This is your recirculate and pump out nozzle. Now on the fill and aerate nozzle, it is adjustable. It screws in or out, and it can actually come completely out. And you'll see there's a slot in there, and so depending on how far you have this in will depend on the amount or the speed with which the water is coming through to fill up your live well tank. And now the recirculate nozzle has 2 positions as well. There are actually 2 hoses that come off of this recirculation valve, and one hose is used when it's in like this, and that's for the recirculation function. And then if you want to use the pump out function in order to empty your live well, you pull it out, and that closes one valve and opens another and allows you to physically pump out the water that's in your live well, and we'll take a look at that a little later. Now also up top here, underneath, you'll see you have 2 ports, one to the left of the fill nozzle and one to the right of the recirculation nozzle. What those are overflow ports. So if you're filling your live well and you leave it on continuously, you don't have to worry about your live well overflowing. Once the water reaches that level, water will go out of these ports and prevent any type of overfill. And on the bottom of the tank here, you'll see you have 2 ports. You have a screened port here on the left, which is for the pump out function. And when you use the recirculation pump and you pull that out and you want to use that function, that's where the water leaves the tank. Here you have a manual drain. Take that out, screw it out, and you can empty your tank that way. So we'll take a look at all the functions one by one, but first, let's head to the back of the boat and check out what all those holes in the back of your boat are for. Okay, so when you are at the back of your boat, you're going to notice that you have several holes in your boat. And now, I don't know about you, but this was my first bass boat, so I didn't have a lot of knowledge as far as the components and the operations of different systems on it and stuff. And one of the first questions I asked the guy who sold me the boat was, I said, what are all the holes for? So I'm going to go over that with you in case you have those same questions. So on the back of the boat, you will see that you have a port here, you have a port here, you have one here, here, there, and you have a couple underneath, facing downward. So let's go over those one by one. The first port you have here has a screen covering on it, and that is your fill intake port. That is to say, that is where water comes from in the lake into your boat. And it has a screen on it to help filter out debris so you don't get any nasty stuff in there or large stuff. And you are able to simply unscrew this screen, and there you have the port that fills your live well. Now, the rest of the ports have different functions, but one easy way to remember this is the only port by which water goes into your boat. All of the other ones, water's coming out. So next we have your drain plug hole, and that should be self-explanatory. That should always have a plug in it, especially if you're on the water. You know what I mean? So there's your drain plug hole. The port next to the drain plug hole to the left of it is the outlet port when you use the manual drain in your live well. So you saw that we had the screened drain in there, which is the mechanical pump out function, but you also have the manual drain plug that you can unscrew and take out. If you use that to empty your live well, that's where it's going to come out. Now underneath here, you have these two ports here, and what those are for, that is where water comes out from your overflow ports inside your live well. So if water gets past that level, it's going to go through those ports, it's going to go through some plumbing and come back here, and that's where that water is going to escape. And then over here on the port side of the boat, you have two ports. The top port is the bilge outlet port, and so when you use your bilge pump and you turn it on, if you have water, that's where it's going to come out. So the bilge is the lowest portion in your boat, in the hull, where water accumulates, and water certainly accumulates there. In heavy rains, water goes through all the various drains on your boat and goes down into your bilge, or if you have some sort of leak. And if you've ever owned an aluminum boat, you know that there isn't an aluminum boat on the face of the planet that doesn't leak somehow. So if you have any type of leak, or you have heavy rains or anything like that that puts water in your boat, you turn on the bilge pump, it will come out of this port here. And now the port below it is the pump out function port. So when you use the pump out function to empty your live well, that's where the water will come out. So again, I had a lot of questions as to what those were for. I didn't have an understanding of it, but in case you had those questions, I hope that helps you out a little bit there. So as I said, the pump system on this boat incorporates the use of 3 different pumps, 2 live well pumps and a bilge pump. The first live well pump is mounted underneath the live well, and you access that by going into your center seat, and there's a panel under there that is underneath all my junk here that is secured by 4 screws, and you simply undo those screws and take that panel off, and that'll give you access to get underneath there. As a matter of fact, I recently did a video on replacing that pump motor under there. If you're interested in taking a look at that, that'll be helpful for you. And that pump is controlled on your driver's console by the timer function on the fill and aerate, and by the continuous function on the recirculate, aerate, and pump out features. So when you click this one up or you click that one down, that pump functions. Now the second live well pump is located in the bilge out in the back of the boat behind the gas tank. I'll go ahead and remove this access port cover, and then down in there you will see the second live well pump, which is the white and orange one. The white part is the canister and the orange part is the motor cartridge that fits inside there. So that is your second live well pump, and that is used when you use the continuous function of the fill and aerate toggle switch or the timer function of the recirculation switch. And so while we're back there, also in the back of the boat is your bilge pump. And so you'll see there the black pump to the right of the live well pump. That is your bilge pump, and that sits down low in the bilge of your boat. And again, the bilge pump should be self-explanatory. That gets water out of the bilge of your boat when it gathers there for any reason, for a leak or weather or whatnot. And again, that is controlled at your driver's console on an on-off toggle switch. All right, so let's talk about the operation itself of the live well. And I suppose the best thing to talk about first would be filling it. So when you want to fill your live well, you use the toggle switch for the fill and aerate section, and you put that on continuous. And when you engage that switch, your live well will fill up by use of the fill nozzle here, the white nozzle on the left. So I'm going to use a garden hose to simulate the lake, which will be our water source, and we will flip on the fill function to fill our live well. Okay, so now that we have that live well filled with water, let's talk about how it operates. So obviously the main purpose of the live well in the first place is to keep your fish alive. How do you keep fish alive? By keeping the water fresh and oxygenated. Now, if you put one fish in a 21-gallon live well and it doesn't get too hot in there and the water stays a good temperature, that fish is going to be able to survive for quite a long time in there on the oxygen that's in that water. But if you increase the temperature, or you put 5 fish in there instead of 1, 5 fish taking up the oxygen in that water, you're going to have a problem keeping those fish alive unless you aerate that water, unless you add oxygen. Now, the primary way to add oxygen to water is through agitation. When water gets agitated, oxygen is created and carbon dioxide is released, thereby oxygenating the water and freshening the water up for the fish to survive in there longer. And so your live well system has a couple of mechanisms by which you can oxygenate that water, that is to say, aerate the water. The first mechanism, of course, being the fill and aerate function, which we just did. We filled the live well with fresh oxygenated water. But let's say it's a couple of hours down the road and we're worried about the fish that we have in there and we want to oxygenate that water further. Well, the first manner we can do that through is the fill and aerate function on your control. So if you go ahead and turn the fill and aerate switch on to continuous, you can add fresh water to your existing tank of water, and thereby you are aerating it or oxygenating it for the fish. So anytime you're bringing in fresh water from the lake you're in or the body of water that you're in, you are oxygenating that water. But another way to oxygenate the water is by use of the recirculation function. Now, the biggest difference between recirculating and filling and aerating is when you use the recirculating function, you are not bringing in fresh water. You're using the same water that's in your tank. It's just being recirculated through the plumbing and put back in the tank. It's being taken out of the tank through the tubing and back into the tank. So you're not adding fresh water, but you are oxygenating it because you're agitating it. So let's see what happens when we turn on the recirculation function. So you can see that the water then comes out of the red nozzle, the recirculation nozzle, because it's taking the water from the drain on the bottom through the plumbing of the boat and then back out through that nozzle, and it's recirculating the water that's in there. But it is important to note that you're not bringing in new water. So why would you want to use recirculation at all? I guess could be a question. Why not just use fill and aerate and pull in fresh water to aerate your tank? Well, you may not always be able to do that for a couple of different reasons. The two biggest ones I can think of is, let's say you're, I mean, I fish a lot in garbage. I fish in shallow water and vegetation and stuff like that. Let's say I'm in 1.5 feet of muddy, nasty water, and I don't want to bring that water into my tank. Well, I can use the recirculation function to recirculate the existing water and still aerate the water. But another reason might be that you need to aerate that tank when you're not on the water. You know, I mean, you could have a fish in there that you need to take to a weigh-in site, and you're not in the water, your boat's on a trailer, and you're on the road, and you want to aerate that tank. You can do that with a recirculation function because you don't need water coming into the boat. You're going to use the existing water to recirculate it through the system. I was in a tournament in Florida last year, and I had to drive 40 minutes from where my brother caught a fish to where we needed to weigh it in. So you have that ability when you have a recirculation function in your tank to recirculate the existing water and to keep it oxygenated for that fish so you can weigh that hog in. So in a nutshell, there's basically two ways to add oxygen to the water, and that is by adding new water with new oxygen, i.e. the fill and aerate function, or by agitating the water to create oxygen by using the recirculation function. Either way, you're going to be able to aerate that water and keep your fish fresh. So now let's take a look at how it works when we want to empty that live well. So if I want to use the pump out feature that comes on this boat, and you may have the same thing or you may not, you may only have manual, but this boat is equipped with a pump out feature, which makes life a little bit easier. And so this is how that works. So all you have to do is pull out the recirculation nozzle and flip the recirculation toggle switch to continuous. And you'll see that that is the pump out port there, the lower one on the port side. But you can also empty it using the manual drain. Now when you use the pump out function, the water is drawn through this screen drain here. But in the event that you wanted to use your manual drain function for some reason, either your pump out feature is on the blink and it's not working, or you just want to use the manual feature, all you have to do is unscrew the drain and you can see that that is the manual drain port. So we have the intake port, the manual drain port. Underneath are the overflow ports for the live well. And as you saw, we have the pump out port. So what about the bilge? Well, if you have water in your bilge for some reason, either through a massive rainstorm or you have some type of leak and you have water in there, you can turn on your bilge pump. And so turning on your bilge pump is this toggle switch here. And you can see that the top port on the port side of the boat here is the bilge port. So much like your live well, which has two functions by which you can empty it, those being the pump out feature if you have that, and the manual drain, your bilge has two mechanisms by which you can empty that as well. Your bilge pump, but let's say your bilge pump isn't working. which would be a problem if you're on the water, because you obviously can't use the drain plug when you're on the water, but you also have a drain plug. And so you can see there, I filled the bilge up with some water using the garden hose, and that's where it's coming out. So just a quick recap here on those ports on the back of your boat. Here you have your bilge pump out port. Here you have your live well pump out port. You can see the manual drain for the bilge going there. I put quite a bit of water in there. To the left of it, you have the manual drain port for the live well. Underneath, you have the overflow ports for the live well. And then over here, you have the live well intake port, which again is the only port that water goes in and doesn't come out. So you have those 3 pumps that I went over with you, the 2 live well pumps and the bilge pump, and you have all the ports on the back of your boat, which I showed you there. So if you were looking for some information about how exactly your live well system and the bilge system in your boat works, I hope this video was a help to you. I know that when I bought my boat, I did not know, and I had a lot of questions about which port did which, and I like to understand how things work. So listen, I am not an expert. I am not a boat technician. I'm certainly not a live well expert. But regardless, I hope this video was a help to you, and I hope you have a good, safe time out there fishing, and that you have to use that live well often. Yes, sir. Hey, we'll see you next time on Chicken Thigh Fishing. And until then, stay fishing, my friends.